Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Midweek Mindset. So the question today is, are you weary? Are you weary? Are you tired? Are you worn out? Are you exhausted? And I'm not just talking about physically. I'm talking about mentally. Just overwhelmed in your mind and mentally and emotionally. I can't take anymore. I'm gonna break. Where are you? Are you at that point? Or maybe spiritually. I I try to do good things and I make mistakes and I mess up and you know how how tired are you? How weary are you? That's what I want to talk about today for just a moment. I want to start with a familiar passage to most of you, and it's in Matthew chapter 11, and Jesus is talking to the people, and down in verse 28, he says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Wow, what a great promise. What a great promise to have in Christ. The problem is most of us don't experience that, at least not on an ongoing basis. And let's talk about maybe why for just a minute. First, let's talk about the burdens. The people today, they're faced legalistic religion burdens. The scribes and Pharisees had created a system in Judaism with hundreds of different rules and regulations the people needed to keep and had to worry about all the time, because if they didn't do these things, they weren't righteous and they didn't deserve a relationship with God, and they were weighing them down with these legalistic burdens. For other folks, and maybe you're struggling with religion in general with that, and worried about that. For some folks, it's guilt, or shame, things that you've done in the past that you weigh on you day after day, and whether you're worried that somebody's going to find out what you did, or these things that haunt you, and bad things I did and way back when, maybe even, and they weigh on people over time. They carry that guilt of past sin and things that you did do that you shouldn't have done, or things that you didn't do that you should have done, or worrying about life decisions and mistakes I've made or whatever. And so we get this guilt and our past sin and the shame that goes along with that, and the worry that goes along with that, or the legalistic religious things of keeping all the rules. Do they wear you down? Are you tired from all of that? Well, let me tell you that when Jesus speaks these words and he's talking about the yoke, and the people were familiar with that picture of the oxen with that wooden yoke, right? That held them together, and they pulled the wagons and they pulled the plows, and the yoke was about getting some work done, and it was hard work that was needed. And Jesus says, "Come to me, all that are weary and burdened." When you have all of those worries of the world and the sin and the guilt and mentally and emotionally and spiritually overloaded and just can't take anymore, he says, "Come to me," and he gives us this great promise, "and I will give you rest." And some of you just that thought of rest is like, wow, that would be so great. That would be so fantastic. Well, that's available in Jesus Christ. And how do we get that? He says, "Take my yoke," not the yoke of the world that has all of this baggage and all this stuff connected. Take his yoke. And he says, "I am gentle and humble in heart," and that he says, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. And you say, well, oh, that sounds great, but how do we get there? We get there by actually trusting Jesus Christ, focusing upon what Christ calls us to do in as believers in Him. And how do we get that yoke? That's the first step. Believe in Jesus Christ and who He is, who He says He is, and what He's done upon the cross, and His victory over sin and death. That we believe those things about Christ. We commit ourselves to Him, and when we commit ourselves to Him, it is taking that yoke that He's offering, and we're put alongside Him, and He does the work. He carries the heavy load. Then He carries that heavy load. And another thing that comes in here is a mentoring factor in that. And He says, I will give you rest, take my yoke upon you, and learn from me. And learn from me, He says. Learn what He has to say through His Word and through prayer and spending time with Jesus Christ. You know, they would take the mature oxen or whatever and put a younger one next to him, and he would learn how to do that. And Jesus doesn't say, follow me and there'll be no work to do. No, but He is doing the bulk of it, wearing that yoke, that we are in yoke step with Him. You can't stray away. If you're in that yoke together, we stay near Him. That's important, to stay near Him and learn from Him, because if we get away from Him, that guilt of the world and trying to do it all by yourself and trying to, put on a good show for others and put on that happy face and do all these things that we think the world expects from us. And we get away from, real quick, we get away from following Christ. And so the challenge today is to find rest in Him. And maybe that's a concept that you can't grab in 5 minutes, right? And if that's the case, I encourage you to reach out to me, contact me through our website, or respond to this video, make comments, and I'll be glad to help you find that path to Christ. If you struggle with that, if you're a believer in Jesus Christ and you're allowing the baggage and the weight of the world to pile upon you and drag you down and keep you from doing what Jesus has called you to do, then I challenge you today to go and confess your sin, that you're doing all these things on your own, and laying those things at the foot of the cross, and asking Christ to help you reevaluate the important things and take away the worries and stresses and the things you can't do anything about anyway. We'll find out that yoke is easier and lighter, and the closer we walk to Him, the more of that yoke He takes on. And so that is the challenge for you this week. Don't get buried in the stresses of this world and the guilt and the shame and everything that this world throws upon you and that the enemy tries to fill your mind with. But instead, seek Christ in that relationship and find rest in Him. Have a great day.